Queensland, Queensland, Queensland. State known for sunshine, surf and angry racist gingers really has it all. Pop up to the tropical tableland city of Cairns and marvel at the wondrous rainforests. Head way out west to Longreach, which as the name suggests is in the middle of butt-fuck nowhere. Or head to Brisbane and be immersed in the traffic. That's right, traffic. There are cars fucking everywhere.
It's notoriously difficult to move around this city. Whether trudging through turgid traffic or transiting on tidy trains, there's one thing that this boot and the people of Brisbane have in common. They're both asking, how the hell did we get here? There are many reasons as to why people tend to choose to hit the bitumen in Brisbane instead of taking public transport. Aside from the fact that public transport here is absolute dog shit, there's also another reason. A long forgotten relic of Brisbane's history, the tram. How was that?
Back in the 19th century, Brisbane was expanding, a burgeoning metropolis on the frontier of Australia. Exciting new technologies like the railway, horses, and land dispossession were being introduced, but many people just weren't able to afford them. That changed in 1885 when the Metropolitan Tramway and Investment Company came to town and built Brisbane's first horse-drawn tramway, which most people still couldn't really afford. Eventually, a different company came along and proclaimed that horse-drawn trams are for schmucks and electricity is the way of the future. They ushered in the first electric trams in 1897 from Logan Road to Victoria Bridge in South Brisbane. Suddenly, everyone was able to move around the city with relative ease, and trams became the most popular way to commute up until the late 1910s. This left many horses out of business, and you could often find them at dive bars, washed up, dishevelled and depressed.
Yeah, line a couple up for us, cheers bud. Quite a long face. Quit horsing around. Whoa!
Patronage exploded in between the turn of the century and the end of World War II, with a peak of 160 million passengers in 1944 and 5. To put that into perspective, I made a graph. This is the population of Brisbane, this is the population of unemployed horses, and this is the amount of people that use the trams in 1 year. From Ascot to Alderley, Maruka to Carindale, their service area was truly enormous.
It's Nelly Furtado once saying, why do all good things come to an end? Well, like flames to dust and lovers to friends, the rise of the automobile sounded the death knell for our dear trams. But it wasn't just the car's fault. No. There was some foul play afoot.
Fast forward to the swinging 60s, and Brisbane was in many ways still stuck in the late 1800s. There were dirt roads, no sewers and rapscallions everywhere. Then along came Clem Jones, seen here looking particularly silly. Fed up with having to shit in a dunny, he paved streets, fixed drainage, made a town plan, kicked a dog and rid the city of the dreaded night soil. However, he held a seething hatred for the trams and he lobbied hard to regain the road for the automobile.
Drink bad. Okay.
This is the site of the former Paddington Tram Depot. It burnt down back in 1962 in suspicious circumstances. Some say they even saw Clem Jones himself lighting the fire. This fire was disastrous for Brisbane's trams because it destroyed a fifth of the fleet and led to the closure of 5 tram routes.
Then one day, an American named Wilbur Smith met with Clem Jones and said, "I have a plan." The plan was known as the Brisbane Transportation Study and it proposed a raft of dramatic changes to the city's urban landscape.
Wilbur Smith made a suite of recommendations, most of which never came to fruition, but there was one recommendation that probably should have. They were going to turn the entirety of the suburb of Woolloongabba into a big freeway interchange. Now that is a missed opportunity. But one thing that was suggested and did happen was the closure of the trams. Clem Jones jumped on the idea like Lizzo in a cake factory, and in 1969 the entire network was rolled up, buried under the bitumen of denial, deceit and disinterest. But I'm sure you could guess what happened next. Say it with me, children. Everything went wrong!
For you see, just like eating a pizza when you're on a diet or marrying your cousin, the plan backfired spectacularly and had many unintended consequences. While a lot of the reasoning behind removing the trams was to improve traffic congestion, as time went on, Brisbane grew. And as Brisbane grew, more people needed to move around the city. With a lack of effective public transport, people were forced to buy cars, which in turn forced more people onto the road where the buses were, making the bus slower, making more people buy cars, meaning more people use the roads and so on and so forth until meow.
We could reintroduce the trams, but the problem with that is largely to do with Brisbane's urban infrastructure. The roads are narrow and noodle their way along the contours of hills, making any new transit route meandering and indirect, something that you can clearly see with the bus and train routes of today.
It is possible to build new tram routes on existing roads, but without their own right-of-way, they tend to increase congestion and confuse old people. So, what remnants of Brisbane's former tram routes exist today?
There's a naughty little tram stop here. This is a span pole. It used to have wires attached to it. And there's this, a few hundred metres of tram track in the middle of a busy road. It's not a lot, and ironically, even this is going to be swallowed up by a busway. It's pretty boring.
So, here we are. Clogged roads with buses that run on gas and claim to be Australia's most modern fleet. An advertising term which really means nothing to commuters. The current Brisbane City Council is building a metro, which isn't really a metro, it's just longer buses. It's kind of like polishing a turd but forgetting to wash the shit off your hands afterwards. The state government is building an underground railway line, which is kind of good but won't really be useful for another 10 years. It's not all bad news though. The silver lining is that there seems to be a bit of a tram renaissance in other cities. The Gold Coast is building their own light rail system now, presumably because the cost of using diesel buses to transport all of their prostitutes and methamphetamine from one point of the city to the other was becoming prohibitive.
So what's next for our public transport then? Are we forever doomed to spending hours at a time on slow, smelly buses or trains that never come? Will this get any better? Well, the answer to that question is probably. It's the nature of progress, everything changes eventually. But until then, we should embrace it. Brisbane prides itself on its slow pace and laid-back attitude. That's why people move here from the other states in droves. So the next time you find yourself waiting for a bus that may never come, don't despair. Whip out your go-card, chuck on your favourite podcast, say good day to the driver, and settle in for the ride. Because no matter how bad it may get up here, at least we're not living in fucking Sydney.
The squeal of steel on steel is gone, the hissing of the trolley wheel on copper wire is silenced, the tracks are covered over, the wires cut down, trams burnt or sold, for chicken runs the subtropical sun no longer shines of strips of steel in hot streets. They scrapped the trolley, bus and tram and covered up the tracks with tar in the name of old Clem, progress